This is a quick video about Nietzsche's doctrine of eternal recurrence. So what is eternal recurrence? Okay, eternal recurrence is the idea that the universe has been recurring and it will continue to recur for an infinite number of times, and that this present moment has already existed countless number of times before and it will continue to recur for infinity. The idea is not to be confused with ideas such as reincarnation or Buddhist rebirth, as the theory of eternal recurrence is an entirely physical concept. It doesn't involve actual souls or spirits or anything like that being reincarnated. It's just a purely kind of somewhat deterministic physical principle. There are two interpretations of Nietzsche's concept of eternal return. The first one is that it's simply a psychological technique or a psychological method, and the second interpretation is that it's a metaphysical, actual, real, physical thing. The most popular interpretation is the psychological interpretation. Now, this idea was posited by Nietzsche as a method of affirming our existence, of life affirmation, and so we can use it to draw our attention away from thoughts of other worlds and otherworldly hopes and desires, to just focus primarily on this life and this existence, rather than looking towards the heavens or religion or anything sort of metaphysical or external to us. Nietzsche describes this idea as he says in The Gay Science, the greatest weight, which means that it's the hardest worldview to affirm. So Nietzsche wants us to imagine that this life as we have lived it now, we have lived countless times before, and we will live it countless times again. And he wants us to reflect on that, and then to think. His whole idea is that it would shock us, and we'd think to ourselves, oh my god, I don't want to live like this. I don't want this particular moment to return again. So I'm going to have to do something about it. I'm going to have to overcome myself and improve myself, do the things that I want to do, because this moment is what is going to be recurring forever. And so I want this moment to be joyous. I want it to be something which I want it to be. The second interpretation is that it was a actual, real, metaphysical doctrine. He was actually positing a particular truth about the world, and that as a result, time is not linear but circular, as in circular time. It's often argued that Nietzsche was anti-metaphysics. He was not for positing a kind of structure, or an absolute structure, or an absolute truth to the universe, which, if we take this doctrine of eternal recurrence to be metaphysically real, then that is what he is positing. He's positing a system or a structure to the world, a truth which a lot of people would argue he was against, being a perspectivist. However, there's been people such as Heidegger who would argue that Nietzsche's doctrine of eternal recurrence is true. It is a metaphysical reality, and that is what Nietzsche was, in fact, arguing. Now, the evidence that we have for Nietzsche proposing the doctrine as a metaphysical truth is mainly to be found in his posthumous works, The Will to Power, where he talks a lot, including the famous monster quote, which I quoted a few videos ago, where he specifically talks about eternal recurrence being a metaphysical reality. Okay, so we know that all systems are built on various assumptions and premises, or various philosophical axioms. They all have a structure or a foundation to them. Now, if we look at Nietzsche's metaphysical view of eternal recurrence, we can see that there's two, or maybe three or four basic assumptions that Nietzsche makes. The first one being cause and effect. We must assume that cause and effect is a real phenomenon. The second one is the belief that time is infinite. The time isn't just an abstract concept, that it's an actual real existing thing that never had a beginning and never has an end. It just goes on for infinity. The third assumption is the idea that matter is finite. There's only a set number of atoms or matter or energy in the universe. So if we follow these assumptions, these three basic assumptions, and we assume them to be true, then it logically follows that over an infinite timeline, there's only a certain number of configurations or arrangements that matter or energy can have. And so over an infinite timeline, the arrangements of all the atoms as they are right now in the universe has happened in the past and will happen again in the future. So this very moment, me talking to the camera now, me talking to you now, this moment has happened an infinite number of times in the past, and it must happen an infinite number of times in the future. It's kind of similar idea to the multiverse idea, the idea of the multiverse, that in one dimension, everything about your life is the same except, I don't know, you have a different car or something, or some other small minor change, And so your life as you live it must happen again an infinite number of times in the future, as it's already happened an infinite number of times in the past. It's kind of a weird idea to get your head around, but if we believe these three basic assumptions, then this has to be the case. There isn't really anything more to it, really. It just kind of logically follows. Nobody can know for sure whether this is what Nietzsche was actually going to write about in his last work that he was working on, his masterpiece, the revaluation of all values, he was going to call it. Because obviously he died and he went mad, and so we don't know quite where he was going to go with this idea, or if he was going to use it at all. But I believe that he did intend it to be a metaphysical truth. I think that he was just trying to find a way to make it fit, without trying to sound, or without, I think he was trying to find a way to make it fit without appearing to be metaphysical, if that makes sense. Because he'd said a lot of stuff against metaphysics, and so he was trying to find a way to fit it into his perspectivism. But as a psychological theory, I think that it's good, but it's not. It doesn't, well, for me anyway, it doesn't mean as much as perhaps Nietzsche wanted it to mean, if he intended it as just a thought game or a mind game, something to ponder, But either way, it's a very interesting theory of his, a very interesting doctrine, and yeah. So that's that. Thanks for watching.